Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights, the place where bedtime stories don't always end sweetly. I'm Evergray, your storyteller in the shadows. Each tale is a little strange, a little spooky, and just creepy enough to keep you peeking over the covers. So settle in, close your eyes, but don't fall asleep just yet. This is the podcast where spooky stories tiptoe into your ears just before the lights go out. Tonight's tale takes us to a quiet place, one you might visit without a second thought, a place filled with shelves and silence, where the air smells like paper and secrets. But sometimes the quietest places remember the loudest things. This is the story of Elizabeth, a girl who finds a book that won't stay shut, a name the town forgot, and a mystery buried beneath her feet. So settle in, listen closely, and don't trust the cold spots. Tonight's story is called The Cold Spot in the Library. Elizabeth Wren had been to the Graypine Library more times than she could count. It was quiet, always smelled like paper and floor polish, and most importantly, it had corners no one bothered to notice. That made it perfect for waiting out the hours until her mom finished work at the post office. She usually read by the window or doodled strange creatures in the margins of her homework. But today, something pulled her towards the back end of the library, where the lights always buzzed faintly and the air carried a trace of something sour and sweet, like rotten apples. She didn't know why she stopped at the history section. That part of the library was usually forgotten, just rows of faded hardcovers with gold lettering and cracked spines. But as she passed the second shelf, something caught her eye. A large book lay open on the floor, pages spread wide, spine creaking like it had sighed just before she got there. Elizabeth frowned. She hadn't seen anyone come through this aisle. Curious, she bent down. The book was thick and old, the leather cover stained and curling at the corners. A dusty title was etched into it in faded script. Graypine Records, Local History and Notable Incidents. The pages it was open to were number 113 and 114. One column was headed Missing Persons 1922 to Present. Elizabeth's eyes skimmed the list. Dozens of names, dates, ages. The ink blurred at the corners like it had absorbed water a long time ago. But one entry made her stomach twist. Melanie Ainsley, age 16, disappeared September 8th, 1994, last seen in Graypine Library. Her eyes widened. This wasn't a story. This was here. This was now. And someone had left a bookmark tucked right beside the entry. Elizabeth picked it up carefully. It was a narrow strip of red velvet, stiff with age. There was a smudge, dark brown, right in the center. She rubbed it with her thumb, but it didn't bulge, a stain. And written faintly on one end in pencil was something she couldn't read at first. She turned it towards the light. Finish the report. She froze. Goosebumps bloomed up both her arms. Elizabeth looked around the aisle. Empty. Just the hum of ceiling lights and the whisper of air vents. She gently closed the book, sliding the bookmark back between the pages, and pushed it onto the shelf where she had found it. When she walked away, she didn't notice the book fall open again. Same page, same place. The next day, Elizabeth returned to the library. She told herself it was for math homework, but she knew better. She walked past the front counter, waved at Miss Linton, who barely looked up from her computer, and headed straight to the back of the library, towards the shelf where the old history book had been left wide open. She didn't expect it to still be there, but it was. Same book, same page, 113. Velvet bookmark was pressed against Melanie Ainsley's name. Elizabeth stared. Her fingers hovered above the pages as if she was afraid to touch them this time. She'd closed it, she remembered, pushing the heavy cover shut, sliding it back into place. Yet, there it lay, spread open like it had never moved. She reached for it and stopped. Her fingertips tingled. The air around the book was wrong. She pulled her hand back and reached forward again, slower this time. Cold, not the kind of cold from air conditioning or a draft, not like opening the freezer. This was dense, breath-stealing cold, like the air had stopped moving entirely. Elizabeth backed away. Heart fluttering in her chest, she pressed her palm against her own arm. Goosebumps. Every hair stood up. She looked up, expecting to see a vent or maybe a ceiling fan turning too fast, but nothing was overhead. Just dust-thick fluorescent lights. They flickered just once, a quick buzz, a dim flash, then silent. She spun around and marched to the front counter. "Miss Linton," she asked, forcing her voice to stay even, "do you know if there's a cold draft or something near the history section?" Miss Linton blinked. "The back shelves?" "Yeah, it's freezing over there." The librarian's eyes darkened for a moment. Her smile twitched. "That corner," she said slowly. "Probably just the insulation. This building's been here since before central heating. There was always cold spots." But the lights flickered too. "Old wiring. This place is practically held together with duct tape and good intentions." Miss Linton gave a short, clipped laugh. Elizabeth didn't laugh with her. The librarian seemed to notice. Her voice lowered slightly. "Is something wrong, Elizabeth?" "No," Elizabeth said quickly. "I was just curious." She turned and walked back to her table by the window, heart still pounding. As she passed the history shelf again, she didn't look at the book. She didn't have to. She could still feel the cold, like it was following her. That night, while brushing her teeth, she swore she heard a soft thump in her backpack, like a book shifting by itself. She didn't check. But when she opened her bag the next morning, the red velvet bookmark was tucked into the front pouch. She hadn't put it there. Elizabeth didn't tell anyone about the bookmark. Not her mom, who was too busy to notice Elizabeth growing quieter each day. Not her teachers, who barely glanced up when she passed in the halls. Not even her best friend Zoe, who would have just said creepy, burn it. Instead, she slipped the bookmark into a shoebox under her bed and tried not to think about it. But the library wouldn't leave her alone. That Friday, she returned to school. Something pulled her back. Not curiosity anymore, something deeper, like a whisper, calling just beneath hearing. The history book was open again, page 113. She knelt beside it, drawn closer than she meant to be. The air was cold, yes, but it was more than that now. It was heavy, like the air had weight, like something was standing there with her. She reached out slowly, her fingertips hovered over the page. This time, she noticed the fingerprint. It was pressed into the paper beside Melanie Ainsley's name. Just one, pale, faded, and oddly smeared, like it had been left in dust. But when she touched it gently, nothing came off on her skin. It was sealed into the page. She leaned in closer, her breath fogged in the cold, and just for a second, she thought she saw something move in the reflection of the book's glossy lettering. Not her face, another, a girl, flickering, watching. Elizabeth stumbled back, knocking over a small stack of books behind her. Thump. "Everything okay back there?" Miss Linton called from the front. "Fine," Elizabeth squeaked. She didn't try to touch the book again. Instead, she stood and turned towards the shelves behind her. Something was different. One of the books had slid out slightly, just enough to catch her attention. A book she'd never seen before, spine cracked and discolored. Unexplained Events of Graypine, 1970-1995. She pulled it out and opened to the front page. Someone had written inside it, in careful, upright print. Not a name, just a phrase. "Keep going. The others are here too." The lights above her flickered again. She snapped the book shut and hurried to her table. She didn't read, she didn't doodle, she just sat. The cold followed her. It rested over her shoulders like breath. When she packed up to leave, the velvet bookmark was back. This time, it was inside the book she hadn't opened. Her geometric textbook. And written in red pen, faint and slanted, was a single word. Soon. Saturday morning was gray and rainy, the kind of day meant for cocoa and cartoons, but Elizabeth had other plans. She had told her mom she was going to the library again and left before breakfast. Miss Linton wasn't at the front desk this time. A substitute librarian sat there instead, humming softly and scanning a stack of returns. That was fine. Elizabeth didn't want help. She headed straight for the dusty cabinet she'd spotted the day before, the one near the microfilm machine, long ignored and marked archive materials, do not remove. She opened it. Inside were old folders, brittle newsprint, faded photographs, and cards stamped with checkout dates older than her mother. She flipped carefully through each file one by one until she found a name. A folder labeled Ainsley Melanie. Her hands trembled as she lifted it out. There wasn't much, just a single photo, paper clipped to a crumbling newspaper article. Elizabeth stared at the photograph. The girl in it had shoulder-length hair, long bangs, and a button-up shirt with teeny embroidered cats. She looked about 16. She also looked like Elizabeth, not just a little. The nose, the shape of her chin, the same wide-set eyes. She turned the photo over. In blue ink, Melanie Ainsley, summer reading volunteer, 1994. Elizabeth blanked, then read the article beneath it. Graypine, teen still missing, September 10th, 1994. Melanie Ainsley, 16, was last seen at the Graypine Public Library, where she volunteered on Saturday mornings. According to Raymond Linton, the facility's custodian at the time, she was shelving books in the archive room, but shortly before closing. She never returned home. Her belongings were found undisturbed. Police found no signs of forced entry or a struggle. The case remains unsolved. Linton. That name. Elizabeth's heart skipped. Miss Linton. She slammed the folder shut, shoved it back in the cabinet, and practically ran home through the rain. Her mom was making grilled cheese and humming along the radio when Elizabeth barged into the kitchen, soaked and breathless. "Mom," she said, "do we know anyone named Melanie Ainsley?" Her mom froze mid-slice. Elizabeth saw it happen, the flash of recognition, then denial. Her mom turned slowly. "Where did you hear that name?" "The library." Her mom pressed her lips together. "That was a long time ago. We don't talk about that." "Why not? She was your grandfather's sister, my aunt, but she disappeared before I was even born." "So she's my great-aunt?" "Yes." Her mom sat down heavily. People said she was strange, obsessed with things that didn't matter, ghosts, stories. She used to say the library was hiding something, that people were going missing and no one noticed. Then she vanished too. Elizabeth's throat tightened. She was right, wasn't she? Her mom didn't answer. She only said, "Let it lie, Lizzie. Some stories don't need endings." But Elizabeth wasn't so sure. That night, as she lay in bed, she held the red velvet bookmark under her pillow, and from somewhere in the silence, a voice whispered in her ear, "Thank you for remembering me." Elizabeth waited until Monday. She skipped lunch and went straight to the library after school, heart pounding like it already knew what she was about to do. Her hands itched with the feeling that something was about to change, something big. The cold spot was waiting. It wasn't just the history section now. It had drifted across the aisle, settling near the wall where old shelves sagged beneath books no one touched anymore. The cold wasn't still this time. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and heavy. Elizabeth pressed her palm to the shelf. The third row of books gave slightly, just a teeny nudge inward. Curious, she leaned in and ran her fingers along the spines. Something was there, a gap behind the books. She pushed them aside. A thin cloth-wrapped bundle had been wedged behind the row. It was bound in twine like someone meant for it to never be found. Elizabeth glanced over her shoulder. Miss Linton wasn't at the front desk. She tugged the bundle out, her breath catching as dust puffed into the air. The cloth was a pale gray, almost the color of ash, and the twine had left deep grooves in the fabric. She hesitated, then untied it. Inside was a book with a cracked brown cover. No title, no author, but a sticky note was taped to the front. Removed, do not shelve, 1995. Elizabeth opened it. The inside was scrawled with notes in pencils and pens, some neat, others messy and frantic, names, dates, locations. She flipped to the center. There, tucked beneath pages, was a folded map of the library. It was hand-drawn with arrows and teeny notions. Trapdoor, below fiction, listen for creaking, don't trust R.L. Elizabeth froze. R.L. Raymond Linton, Miss Linton's grandfather. At the bottom of the page, scrawled in red ink, was a line that sent a chill up her spine. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it." She turned the next page. It was filled entirely with frantic handwriting. Melanie's, she guessed. "They're hiding it. The disappearances, the sealed room, the books that vanish overnight. Someone's making sure we forget, but I won't let them. I just need more time." The rest of the page had been ripped out. Elizabeth's hands shook. The library around her felt darker than it had 5 minutes ago. A shadow passed behind her. She turned quickly. Miss Linton stood at the end of the aisle. Her face was unreadable. Her voice was calm. "Where did you find that?" Elizabeth didn't answer. The librarian stepped closer, her tone firmer. "That book was removed from the collection for a reason." "I think it belonged to Melanie Ainsley," Elizabeth said quietly. Miss Linton's jaw tightened. "Come with me." Elizabeth hesitated. "I'm not going to hurt you," Miss Linton said, "but there's something you need to know." Elizabeth followed Miss Linton down the narrow hallway behind the front desk. The librarian's keys jingled at her side as they passed the staff-only door and entered a cramped back room filled with file cabinets, extra chairs, and dusty display boards. Miss Linton shut the door behind them. For a moment, she just stood there staring at Elizabeth. Then she sighed and sat down at the teeny break room table. "That book," she said softly, "shouldn't exist anymore." Elizabeth clutched it to her chest. "Why not?" "Because it's dangerous." Miss Linton folded her hands tightly. "It leads people to ask questions that don't have safe answers." Elizabeth hesitated. "It belonged to Melanie, didn't it?" There was silence. Then, "Yes." Elizabeth sat. Her knees wobbled. "She was my great-aunt. My mom never told me about her until I found that photo." Miss Linton nodded slowly. Melanie was relentless. She believed the library was hiding things, patterns of disappearances, secrets buried in paper and dust. At first, it was harmless, but then she found something she wasn't supposed to. Elizabeth leaned in. "What did she find?" Miss Linton looked away. "I don't know exactly, but she disappeared the next day. My grandfather, Raymond Linton, was the last to see her. He said she left without a word, but—" She swallowed. "He wasn't always honest. And there are corners of this place I've never had the nerve to search." The room seemed colder suddenly. Elizabeth glanced towards the far wall. The light buzzed, then flickered. Just for a second, enough to cast shadows that didn't match the furniture. Elizabeth's breath caught. There, reflected in a teeny microwave door, a face. Pale, wide-eyed, watching her from the corner. She spun around, but the corner was empty. She looked back at the microwave. The reflection was gone. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Miss Linton's face was pale. "I've seen her, once." "Melanie?" Miss Linton nodded. "She's still here, still cold, still waiting." Elizabeth stood suddenly. The book in her hand felt like it was burning with frost. "I need to find the trap door," she said. "Melanie left a map." Miss Linton shook her head. "That room was sealed. If it exists at all, it's buried under decades of floorboards. Leave it be." "I can't." Miss Linton stood up, her voice sharp. "Elizabeth, some truths do more harm than good." "But they're still truths," Elizabeth said. "And she's still here." The librarian didn't stop her as she turned and walked out. That night, Elizabeth returned to the library after hours. She knew where to slip through the loose board in the fence. She knew which side window never locked properly. She knew where the cold waited. By flashlight, she followed Melanie's map across the floor. Near the historical fiction shelves, she tapped gently on the floorboards one by one. Thud, thud, hollow. She dropped to her knees, and there it was, a trapdoor sealed with rusted nails and a library rug pinned down tight. The lights above flickered, and a whisper drifted down from the shelves behind her. Not angry, not scared, just a single word. "Please." Elizabeth didn't sleep that night. She stayed awake with the book open across her lap. Melanie's map folded out beside her, flashlight clutched in one hand. The velvet bookmark lay nearby as if waiting for instructions. She had found the trapdoor. She knew it was real. She also knew she couldn't open it alone. The next morning, she skipped school, returned to the library as soon as it opened. Miss Linton looked up from the front counter, lips parting as if to scald her, but then stopped. There must have been something in Elizabeth's face. Determination? Fear? Maybe both. "I found it," Elizabeth said quietly. The door, just like the map said. The librarian's shoulders sank like someone had let the air out of her. She stepped out from behind the desk and locked the front door behind Elizabeth. "Come with me," she said. They didn't go into the break room this time. Miss Linton led Elizabeth to the furthest corner of the library, the oldest part, where the shelves leaned like tired bones. She sat on a cracked wooden bench, hands folded tight. "My grandfather was the head custodian here for over 30 years, she said. Everyone liked him. Kind, quiet, reliable. She glanced at the floor, but he wasn't any of those things at home. Elizabeth sat across from her, heart beating faster. He used to say the library was full of things that should stay buried. He hated when people went digging, especially kids, especially girls. When Melanie started asking questions, he told her to stop. She didn't. Miss Linton's eyes shone with unshed tears. He told her he'd help, that he'd show her the archive room under the floor. It had been sealed for decades, but the door still worked. He let her go down with her notebook. Then he nailed it shut. Elizabeth's breath caught. He trapped her? I didn't know until years later. I found one of her bookmarks in his desk. It was stained, smelled like mildew. I asked what happened, and he just smiled. The silence between them was unbearable. "You could have told someone," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling. "I was 12, Miss Linton whispered. By the time I understood what he'd done, he was already gone." Elizabeth's fists clenched. "She's still down there." "I know. I'm going to open the door." Miss Linton looked at her, grief twisting her face. "If you do, you might find more than you want to, more than Melanie." "I don't care." The librarian reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key. Small, brass, cold. "She left something behind," Miss Milton said. "A report. Files, tapes. I've dreamt about it. I think the library remembers too." That afternoon, she returned to the trapdoor. She peeled back the rug, bent the old nails with a crowbar borrowed from her neighbor's garage, slid the brass key into the floor latch. It clicked. The door creaked open, releasing a breath of frozen air that smelled like ink and earth and time, and something else. Something waiting. The trapdoor groaned as it opened. Elizabeth held her breath. The cold rolled out in thick wave, heavier than any winter wind she'd ever felt. Her flashlight flickered as she aimed it down into the dark. A wooden staircase descended into black. She climbed down. The basement room smelled like dust, rusted metal, and the faintest hint of candle wax. The air was so still it pressed against her skin. Her flashlight beam caught the edge of a metal filing cabinet, its surface speckled with rust. A broken table leaned far against the far wall, covered in yellow pages, cassette tapes, and a stack of photographs wrapped in twine. Elizabeth stepped forward carefully. The floor groaned but held. She picked up a tape, scrawled in marker, "Final interview, Ainsley." A small recorder sat beside her. Elizabeth pressed play. It hissed for a second, then, "If anyone hears this, I was right. There's something wrong here. It's not just the disappearances. There are people making them happen. Someone is hiding what this town used to be. I found records, I found names, I found too much." A pause, a shaky breath. "I think Mr. Linton knew. He said he'd help. I followed him into the trapdoor and I think he knew I wouldn't come back out, but maybe you will. If you're hearing this, finish the report." Elizabeth's hand trembled as the tape clicked off. On the table, a stack of papers was neatly organized and labeled "Compiled Disappearances 1922 to 1994. At the top of the first page was Melanie's signature. A bookmark lay across the final sheet, red velvet, slightly torn. Elizabeth sank to the floor. The silence was loud now. Then, a figure stepped into the flashlight beam. Pale, hollow-eyed, familiar, Melanie. Her ghost stood just beyond the table, not menacing, not angry, just waiting. Elizabeth swallowed hard. "I found it. I found you." Melanie's eyes softened. Her mouth moved, but no sound. Elizabeth understood. "Thank you." The room warmed slightly. The frost on the cabinets began to fade. Melanie stepped back into the dark and vanished. Elizabeth climbed the stairs slowly, report clutched tight, the final bookmark held in her fist. The next morning, she turned in a social studies project called The Hidden Story of Graypine. It included names, photos, her great-aunt's words. Miss Linton gave her a quiet nod as she passed the front desk. The trapdoor had been resealed but not forgotten. Later that week, a new book appeared on the library shelf. Plain, brown cover, no title. Inside, it began, Melanie Ainsley disappeared in 1994, but her voice never did. At the end was one final sentence written in pencil. Some stories don't end, they echo. That was the cold spot in the library. Some stories don't want to stay closed, some names refuse to be forgotten, and some ghosts, they don't want revenge, they just want to be remembered. Tonight, Elizabeth gave her great-aunt's story a voice. But what about all the others still sealed away beneath our feet? What about the books no one ever returns, the footsteps in the quiet stacks, the cold spots that follow you home? Thank you for joining us for another tale from Sleep Tight Frights, where the shelves creak, the air listens, and the stories never truly end. Don't forget to follow the show and leave a review. It helps to keep the stories alive or undead. And now, stay tuned for your Fear Fact, a true ghost tale about real haunted libraries that might make you think twice about walking into the stacks alone. Your Fear Fact. Libraries are supposed to be quiet, peaceful places, but some remember too much. Let's start with Willard Library in Indiana. It's so haunted they installed a ghost cam, a real live stream where anyone can watch for the Gray Lady, a spirit in a long gray dress who glides silently through the stacks. She's been seen for over a century, always appearing when someone's reading alone. And then there's the Peoria Public Library in Illinois. 3 library directors died under mysterious circumstances, all connected to a set of rare donated books. Staff had reported books tumbling off shelves, cold pockets of air that move, and voices whispering names that no one should know. And in England, deep beneath the Bodleian Library, rumors say that there's a forbidden room sealed centuries ago where books were hidden because they were too dangerous to read. Some say the ink inside them wasn't printed, but bled. All over the world, librarians talk about lights flickering without reason, typewriters clicking when no one's near, and names reappearing in checkout logs, long after the person is gone. So if you ever feel a chill in the library, if the lights stutter just as you pull out a book, and if you hear breathing behind you when no one's there, you're not alone. You're just not the only one reading. Thank you for listening to Sleep Tight Frights. It means more than you know, to us and to the things that listen back. I'm Ever Gray, your guide through the shadows, and if you felt something was watching as the story unfolded, you're not alone. They remember the ones who listen, they wait for the ones who return. So come back soon. Sleep tight if you can.